On the morning of August 13, 2018, in a newly built residential area in Frederick, Colorado, the summer sun filtered through the white picket fences, the wind blew gently across the neatly trimmed lawns. It was a peaceful day like any other in the neighborhood, where young couples raised children, held weekend barbecues and posted family photos on Facebook with loving captions. But shortly after 9 a.m. that morning, an unanswered text message sparked one of the most shocking crimes in modern America. Shanann Watts, 34, was an active, vibrant woman, pregnant with her third child, and the mother of two adorable little girls, Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3. Her personal Facebook page was filled with family photos, loving messages to her husband, Chris Watts, and enthusiastic videos about her business and dream life. But that morning, Shanann didn't show up for her OB/GYN appointment. She didn't respond to her best friend Nicole's text messages. She called and no one answered. Nicole felt uneasy. And just a few hours later, she decided to do what few people would dare to do: call the police about her friend's disappearance. When the police arrived at 2825 Saratoga Trail, they found everything was strangely normal. The door had no signs of being broken into. Shanann's car was still parked in the garage. Her purse, phone, keys, all were still in the house. But she and the two children were not there. The husband, Chris Watts, came home from work soon after. He seemed worried, calling his wife and children's names repeatedly, but his eyes lacked the emotion one would expect from a man who had just lost his family. The police began to suspect something. But what they don't know is that in just 48 hours, the whole country will be watching every step of the investigation when a model husband on social media turns out to be a monster who murdered his wife and two daughters with his own hands. The Watts story is more than just a murder case. It is a broken mirror of the Shanann Watts, a woman who can be called a model in the eyes of her friends and the online community. She always shines in her live streams sharing about the healthcare products she is selling. She often talks about her happy married life, about her two daughters who are her whole world, and about the baby boy growing inside her. On Facebook, she records every moment of her family: Bella's first day at kindergarten, the family trip to the beach, or videos of Chris, the husband, kissing his wife's belly and calling the baby Nico. Everyone thinks they are living in a dream, but that dream has long been cracked. As police and the media began to dig deeper into the lives of Chris and Shanann, what they uncovered shocked many. Shanann had been through a lot of stress in her life, from debt, chronic lupus that made her constantly worried about her health, to juggling housework, raising a young child and running an online business. Chris, the opposite of the image of the perfect husband, was a quiet, reserved and unpredictable person. Neighbors described him as extremely calm, never angry, but never really happy. Around the time of the tragedy, Shanann went to Carolina for a 6-week business trip, while Chris stayed home with their two children. During that time, he began an affair with a co-worker, Nicole Kessinger, a young, vibrant woman who was completely different from his wife, who already had two children. Chris began to live a double life. During the day, caring for his child, sending pictures of his daughter to his wife, replying to loving messages. At night, researching freedom, booking hotels with his mistress, and deleting his entire phone history. Nicole, Chris's lover, later testified that he told her he was separated, about to get divorced, and that Shanann was interfering with his life. Shanann seemed to sense something was wrong. Text messages with her friends showed that she suspected Chris had changed. He was withdrawn, avoiding intimacy, and not even responding to important messages. "I felt like I was living alone," she wrote. "I didn't know if he still loved me." When Shanann returned from a business trip around 2 a.m. on August 13, her neighbor's camera captured the last image. She pulled a suitcase, walked into the house, and never reappeared. Chris initially told police that they had argued the next morning, and that Shannon was still home with the children when he left for work. He appeared concerned, telling police maybe she went somewhere to calm down. But when police asked Chris to turn over his phone, check the security cameras and motion detectors in the house, the lies began to fall apart. The neighbor's camera, which Chris thought was recording nothing, turned out to be his own. The most haunting moment came when the police and the neighbor watched the security video with Chris. The neighbor pointed to the screen and said, "This is when Shannon came home." And then no one left. The video also showed Chris struggling to back his truck into the garage door, something he had never done before. He seemed nervous. The neighbor whispered to the police after Chris left, "I know him. He's not like usual today." The police realized that Chris had been lying all along. And within 48 hours, he was the prime suspect. Chris was taken in for questioning. At first, he insisted, "I didn't do anything." But his eyes wavered, his words faltered. The lie detector test was clear. He knew his wife and child were dead. The police gave him a choice. "Tell us where your wife's body is hidden, or we'll find it and you'll end up in jail." Chris bowed his head. He no longer denied it. But the most horrific twist was yet to come, because the way he murdered each of his loved ones sent shivers down America's spine with its cold-bloodedness and unbelievably calculating cruelty. On August 15, 2018, just 2 days after Shannon and her daughters disappeared, Chris Watts was brought into the interrogation room for the third time. This time, investigators had enough evidence to charge him. But instead of jumping to conclusions, they used their final tactic, an emotional appeal. "We know something happened in the house," one investigator said. "Chris, you're not a bad guy. But good guys can do bad things in the wrong moment." After hours of mental warfare, Chris blurted out, "I'll talk. But I just want to talk to my dad." The police agreed. When Ronnie Watts entered the room, Chris sat with his head down, his hands shaking, and blurted out the words no father wants to hear, "Dad, I killed Shannon." Meanwhile, Chris was still trying to create a false version of the truth. He claimed that Shannon had killed their 2 daughters after learning of his affair, and that in a fit of rage he had lost control and killed her in revenge. The police did not believe him, but the confession opened the door to the real location of the body, the remote oil field where Chris worked. On August 16, 2018, police and forensics teams arrived at the Survey 319 oil field, about 40 miles from Watts' home. And there, they discovered one of the most gruesome crime scenes in Colorado history: Shannon's body, buried in a thin layer of dirt, wrapped in a blanket from her home, Bella and Celeste, hidden in 2 oil tanks, each in a separate tank, with an opening only about 8 inches wide. How could Chris have gotten his daughter, alive, into the crude oil tank? A month later, Chris changed his story completely. During his final interrogation at the prison, he recounted the murder in detail, calmly and coldly, almost horrifyingly. 3 a.m., Shannon returns home. They argue. Chris admits to having an affair and wants a divorce. 4 a.m., Shannon breaks down in tears, begging him not to leave her and the children. Chris gets on top of her, strangles her for nearly 2 minutes. Shannon struggles, and then stops moving. At that point, Bella, the eldest daughter, enters the room. "I asked where Mommy was," Chris said. "I said, Mommy's not feeling well." Chris wraps Shannon's body in a blanket and drags her into the truck. The 2 girls follow their father to the back seat, right next to their mother's body, wrapped in a blanket. No screaming, just asking, "Daddy, where's Mom? Daddy, where are we going?" Over an hour drive to the oil field. Bella and Celeste didn't cry the whole way? When they got there, Chris lied again. "We're going home after Dad works." Then he killed Celeste by strangling her with a blanket. Throwing her body into an oil tank, Bella watched. When Chris turned around, Bella said, "Daddy, I don't want to die." Those were her last words, but Chris did it anyway. Strangled Bella. Stuffed her body into a second oil tank. The entire confession was recorded by the FBI, and to this day is considered one of the most shocking confessions in America, not only because of its brutality, but because of the way Chris told it, as if he were talking about moving house. Not a single tear. Not a single expression of guilt. Chris said he felt suffocated by his marriage. He was afraid of losing his lover. Afraid that Shanann would take away custody of his children. Afraid of losing face in front of his family and society. And he wanted to free himself. That was the motive, pure selfishness. He did not kill in self-defense. He did not kill out of a sudden outburst of anger. He killed because he wanted a new life, without the burden of a wife and children. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts appeared in court, in front of the judges and his wife's family. He pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of his wife, Shanann, and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste. He was also charged with killing their unborn child, Nico. When Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant, Chris did not fight. He did not ask for leniency. He did not enter a plea. The defense negotiated a deal for Chris to plead guilty in exchange for avoiding the death penalty, as Shanann's family had wanted. In a scene that left the courtroom silent, Shanann's mother, Sandra Rzusek, said, "I'm a mother, and I lost everything. My daughter, my two grandchildren, my unborn grandson. But I don't want him to die. I want him to live with what he did, every day. In the dark, without light, without hope. That's the ultimate punishment." The room fell silent. Some reporters wiped away tears. Shanann's father looked down, clutching his Bible. On November 19, 2018, the judge sentenced 5 life sentences without parole, 3 for the 3 children, 1 for Shanann, 1 for the fetus Nico, 48 years for concealing a body, 36 years for tampering with a body, total, nearly 300 years. Chris was imprisoned at Dodge Correctional Institution, Wisconsin, with no chance of ever being released. After the trial, the police returned the girls' personal belongings. Among them was Bella's pink princess shoe. Covered in crude oil, dented from being stuffed through a hole in a tank that was too small, a forensic officer broke down in tears when he found it. The shoe was kept by Shanann's family as the most painful symbol of the case. Just a small shoe, but carrying the full weight of a terrible crime. Shanann's family is devastated. Her mother, Sandra, suffers from PTSD, often dreaming of her daughter being strangled. Her father had to move out of the house where she grew up, because every wall there is a reminder of memories. Many of Shanann's friends, who appeared on live streams, why the TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube communities analyze Chris's every move and every look. They can't understand. How could a father kill his own son after hearing him say, "Dad, I don't want to die"? More than just a murder case, What's Family Murders raises big questions about modern society. Does social media really reflect real life? Shanann always appears happy, but then everything turns into an illusion. How dangerous can men's hiding of emotions be? Chris never screams. But then one day, he kills his whole family. What can personal selfishness lead to? Just because he wants to start over with his lover, Chris erases 3 lives. In her final interview, Shanann's mother said, "I wish nothing more than for him to open his eyes and remember, I killed the wife he loved, the 2 children who called him daddy, and a life he never had." The end of the Watts case was not a full stop. It was a cut deep, insidious, and never healed, not only in Shanann's family's hearts, but in society's perception. Chris Watts was not a monster in the traditional sense. He had no history of violence, no psychiatric record. He had been a loving husband, a calm father, a friendly neighbor. But behind that facade was a soul rotted by selfishness, lies, and a fear of losing control. What makes this case so heartbreaking is not just the death of 3 children and a pregnant mother, but the fact that the perpetrator was the person they trusted the most. A father not only killed his own child, but also heard his daughter say "I don't want to die" and still did it. It is no longer murder out of anger, it is murder out of a desire for freedom, a desire to start life over. Without any worries, the greatest crime is not the bloodshed, it is the betrayal of love by the person he loved the most, and the question that remains for us, the viewers, the living, is, how can we recognize the signs before it's too late? And when life seems perfect on social media, is there some